Hey everybody, welcome back to We Are Podcast. This is We Are Bagu, Season 2, Episode 2, a conversation with Patrick Hickey Jr., the author of the Minds Behind the Games book series. If this is your first time checking out the podcast channel, please head over to your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, or iTunes, and give We Are Podcast a like. And if you get a chance, head over to our social media. You can find us at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at /We Are Podcast. And don't forget to join our Discord. All links can be found in the description. And with that, on to the podcast.
We Are Bagu.
Hey everybody, welcome to We Are Bagu, a video game podcast where we talk Atari to Steam and everything in between. My name is Duck. I'm here with my co-host, Reverend Ethan Eastwood. Reverend Ethan, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, and I'm excited about this one, man, because today we got the one, the only, Patrick Hickey. How you doing, man?
You forgot the junior, good sir. You got to add the junior in there. That way people know Patrick Hickey Jr.
You're right.
Yes.
You're right.
I'm not my father.
Yes. So
no, you are your own person. Patrick Hickey Jr. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, guys. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to talking some good stuff. Let's get it on.
Well, let's talk about you a little bit. First of all, you have so many titles: Lecturer of English and Assistant Director of Journalism Program in Kingsborough Community College in Brooklyn, New York. You have written 4 books so far. I'm guessing more at this point. You are the mastermind of the Mind Behind the Games series. So we got the Mind Behind the Games interviews with cult and classic video game developers, the Mind Behind Adventure Games interviews with cult and classic video game developers, the Mind Behind Sports Games interviews with cult and classic video game developers, and finally the Minds Behind Shooter Games. And you have 3 more books on the way, is that correct?
Yeah, one is unannounced. I haven't shared what I'm working on with anybody yet, but if you guys are nice, maybe I'll tell you at the end of the show. And the other 2 are finished. They're completely finished. I'm just waiting to submit them to my publisher, The Minds Behind the Sega Genesis games, which is the biggest book I've done so far. 43 games confirmed, from Altered Beast to Vector Man. I spoke to the developers of all of those games. And then the other book I literally just finished like a week and a half ago is The Minds Behind the Sony PlayStation games. I mean, that has Final Fantasy VII in it. It's got Parasite Eve. It's got the Sony exclusive sports games that we all grew up loving. It's got a little bit of everything. So that's got 40 games in it. Yeah. So 2021 and 2022 are going to be really sexy. So, and that's just the writing. That's just the writing stuff, like the book stuff. I mean, I'm going to have credits in like 4 or 5 video games this year too, as a voice actor, as a writer. So it's going to be really interesting. Well, I'm trying.
This man is prolific, dude. I'm telling you, look up his name on the internet and you're just going to find endless websites, because you are so prolific and you continue to work. And I was listening to a podcast earlier that you were talking to, like, your work ethic. It's absolutely insane. Drug-free, never done them in your life, just works like crazy. Family man, have 2 children, is that correct?
Yep, 2. Yep.
Yeah.
My son's going to be 8 months tomorrow, and my daughter's 3.
Congratulations, man.
Thanks.
Super
Thanks,
awesome.
man.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, you are busy all the time, but let's get started where it all began. You are from New York, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Born and raised Brooklyn, New York, the Bensonhurst section of Brooklyn, where all the mafia movies take place. Ooh. So, yeah.
Any connections to that?
Oh yeah, no, I'm like
you were doing the face. I saw it, man. You were like,
about it. He's going like, how much of my mafia background do I really want to share with these guys?
Yeah. So we'll put it this way: like, I'm Irish and German, so I could never be in the mob. But yeah, they were very nice to my family. We'll put it that way.
Nice.
So we were the big Irish guys that they needed somebody to watch the poker table, when nobody was around.
So
they could
you
trust
are
us.
Connected. That's what you're saying.
So.
Nice. I like it. I like it.
He's got that little sparkle in his eye.
Yeah, I see it. I see it. There ain't nothing wrong with that. So what were you like as a child? Were you rambunctious, or were you more introverted?
Oh my God, it was so funny. So, like, I'm a twin, and if I could describe my brother, I would basically say like Kramer from Seinfeld.
Busted in, just out of control, hyper.
Non-stop. My mom used to make him run around the block, like, before bed.
Calm down.
She'd be like, just go run around the block a couple of times. And I remember when I was like 4, my parents took me to the doctor because they thought I was deaf.
Wait, what?
They just out of nowhere thought
because
you were deaf?
because I wouldn't answer them, because I would never answer them. Because I was just being my own little world, reading, because like I knew how to read when I was like almost like before I was 4, I was reading. So like backs of baseball cards and Nintendo Powers and Spider-Mans, and I didn't have to talk to anybody, So my mom would be like, "Oh, go clean your room," and I would just be like, "Yeah, okay, fuck out of here," And
yeah, sure, Mom, I'll go do it when I feel like it. Okay?
Basically, And they took me to the doctor. and they gave me the old hearing test with the ringing in the ear. You remember from elementary school?
Absolutely.
And I'm just like, bing, 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 bing. And the doctor's like, he hears perfectly. I just don't think that he likes you guys. So ever since I was a little kid, I've always had like tunnel vision. If I was interested in something, I would just spend a lot of time with it. And I've always loved sports, and I've always loved writing, and I always loved like playing sports. So it was always like, I didn't have time for like other people's stuff. I always wanted to be doing the stuff that I wanted to be doing.
So that leads you into getting into hockey, correct?
Yeah.
And that was your initial love. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yo, this guy's good.
Yeah, I did a little bit of research, a little bit.
Good. Yeah, because like I'm 6'4". I got in a car accident when I was 18, so I was like 225 pounds, and I wanted to play pro hockey. So like my goal was to take a year off after high school, get in like the best shape that I possibly could, and try and walk on to like a Division 2 or Division 3 hockey program.
What was your like ideal team? Like if you got your pick or whatever, whoever drafted you.
I would have loved to play for the Islanders. That's my team. I was lucky enough that I got to cover them for a couple of years as a journalist and stuff like that. So like I covered pro hockey for about a decade for NBC, for sites that I had started. I have taken pictures of hockey games for the New York Times and the New York Daily News and stuff like that. So I got as close as you could get without actually like playing, But I got in a car accident, and that kind of went out the window, the hockey career. So it was like I was always like a nerd in denial. So I just kind of like, I was in bands for a couple of years, and I was just hanging out and tons and tons of video games that I still have. And I
was going to ask, when did the video games come into the picture?
Oh, always.
Always.
So it's like my parents, we didn't have a lot of money, like growing up, like we were poor. But like back in the day, if you had a console in your house, you weren't that poor. That was like the standard. I remember going over a kid's house one time, and I'm like, what are we going to do? And he's like, you want to play Monopoly? And I'm like, I'm getting the fuck out of here. Like, play Monopoly? You don't have anything. I remember one time a kid had like an Atari 2600, and I was just like, this is like 1992. And I was just like, what is this? I was like,
where's the Mario?
You don't have a Super Nintendo?
So what he had that crappy Pac-Man game probably, most likely.
He had Adventure. He
yeah.
had Haunted House, so like we were playing it, and I was like, yo, this is kind of cool. This is different,
Yeah.
But I was like, how did you get this? And he was like, oh, it's my older brother's, and he went to college, so he just left it here, and blah, 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 blah. So then I was just like, wait, so there's like more than like Nintendo and Genesis? And he's like, yeah. And then he's like, Atari, and then another kid had ColecoVision, another kid had Intellivision, and then one of my Chinese friends had the Honeybee. So I don't know if you know what the Honeybee is.
Never heard of it.
What is it?
So it's basically like half of a Nintendo cartridge with a ribbon that goes up around the top. And what you do is you put the Famicom, the Japanese NES game, on the other half, and it clicks in, and you wrap the ribbon around it, and you put it in the NES, and you're able to play Japanese NES games on an American. So like we played all sorts of crazy Japanese games on the NES. So like I got a really cool schooling in video games from just New York City. You can kind of find anything.
And it sounds like that began the obsession almost of the history building that you have taken on. And one of the things I loved is I was reading an article where you said that you get tired of seeing the same information rehashed over and over and over again, because all people do is go to the Wikipedia, say that's good enough, take that, copy and paste. What you're looking to do with these books is build the lore and legend of development and let people know, like, hey, it's more than just that. These are actual people who created these games, and it was difficult, and they had to go in and actually program these, and what that took and what their life was like, and to help people see it as an art form. Whereas, I think as nerds, we're starting to see it that way. I've been playing a lot of games recently that a lot of people have nostalgia for. Super Mario Land 2, Donkey Kong Country 3, games that some people love, some people hate, but they have a special place in people's hearts. So video games come into the picture, and you are in the car accident, so the hockey goes out the door then at that point. You were always writing at that point? Is that
I was 18, so I was definitely going through that crappy poetry music stage that every 18, 19-year-old like
writing all your edgy tunes that are going to make you big someday.
And he was in a band, he said, too. What would you do in the band?
Yeah, I was in a band. I sang.
Yes. So you
play
brought
a tiny
all that.
bit of guitar. I had super long hair. Oh my god! I was showing my daughter a picture yesterday, and she's just like, like, that's you? I'm like, yeah,
That's
that was
Daddy?
me.
Something
Yeah.
punk rock god's proud, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was like we were kind of like Matchbox 20 kind of
Oh,
stuff,
there
you
you
know.
go. A little alternative.
So like yeah, like modern rock alternative and stuff like that. But that was fun. And then I'll never forget it. I was probably like 20, maybe 21, and I was watching like probably like Batman the animated series or something like that on DVD. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever. And my dad comes in my bedroom and he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "What do you think it is I'm doing?" I'm like, I'm watching TV. I'm chilling. He goes, "Well, you better figure, your shit out because you're not going to continue to live like this the rest of your life." And I'm just like, so what happened was I got a nice settlement from the car accident and I messed up my back really bad. I was in physical therapy. I had a cane. I mean, I wasn't just like fooling around. I was like, and I was just at that point where I just kind of like didn't know what was next. And I was in really like no rush because I was going to physical therapy like 4 or 5 times a week. And the video game store was like 5 blocks away from physical therapy. So it was like I was going in the video game store like pretty much every other day and coming home with stuff. But the thing was, unbeknownst to my family, like I was walking like 35 blocks to like the physical therapist and back. So it's like I was legit like trying to like, I still wanted to play hockey at that point, I think. And I remember getting on the skates like the first time after it was all said and done. And I was just like, yep, nope. So then it was just like, let's go to college. And
Yeah.
I went to college and I took it seriously. And the best thing about community college was nobody wanted to do anything. So I
Right.
legit walked into the student newspaper the first day and I had long hair, bowl chain. I had a Peyton Manning jersey on, Jinko jeans. Like I was like, oh my God, and I was just like, I want to write sports. And the guy that was in charge was like, all right, you're sports editor. And I was like, what? And he was just like,
Just like that.
just like that.
Boom,
And then,
sports
and then
editor.
and then I was like, I want to write video game reviews too. And he's like, okay. So like the first issue, we were monthly. The first issue, I interviewed like some 65-year-old that ran like the French marathon, and he was a student in the school. So he was like a 65-year-old college student, and he ran a marathon, and so that was a cute little feature. But I reviewed Madden 05 on Game Boy Advance and Street Fighter Alpha 3 on Game Boy Advance. So it was just like the sports and the video game stuff, like from that day forward, was just full on. And I didn't look back. I took over that newspaper. Then I went to a 4-year college and I took over that newspaper. Then I started teaching. Then I went to graduate school, then NBC, Examiner. Like, so I was just, I took that one opportunity and I just ran with it.
I was going to say, so your father coming into the room was that pinnacle moment where you're just like, you know what, he's right. I've got to, but it sounds like to me you were already doing everything, and especially to get healthy again. Walking 35, you say 35 blocks?
Yeah, like 2 miles,
Still,
each way, so it was like a 45-minute walk each way,
And that's to physical therapy where you're going to get help
with a
to
cane.
stop hobbling.
Yeah.
On the cane. Oh, dude.
Yeah.
That takes some dedication right
So
there.
the thing is, it's funny though. It's like I could kind of like connect every like important moment in my life to like somebody like kind of challenging me, or somebody kind of saying like, yeah, okay, or, oh, you should do that. And then I go, okay, and then I go do my version of that. Like the whole way this book started was just like somebody really like pissed me off. And what happened was, 33 years old, and I'm just thinking about like all the stuff that I want to do before I have kids, and I was just running through the whole thing, and I'm like, I've interviewed tons of WWE guys, I've interviewed tons of video game developers, tons of athletes. I'm like, I haven't written a book though. I'm like, I got to get this done before this kid is born, because it's going to be even harder like once this kid is born. And I don't want to be one of those people that looks at their kid and is like, I could have did all this stuff, but then I had you. I wanted to be like, no, I'm happy with the person that I am, so now I can make you the best version of yourself. I wanted to also work on the journalism program at the college that I work at. So I went to the head of the department and I'm like, we should create a multimedia journalism program. Like, we should really take this program to like the next like millennium. Like, it's so old and like it needs to be dusted off, new coat of paint, the whole 9 yards. And he was just like, nah, it's good. Didn't want to do anything. He's got tenure. So then I just snapped back and I was like, well, then I'm going to write a book. So we had shared an office together for like 10 years. And his response to me was, then go write your book, kid.
Wow.
So I was like, okay. So I went home and I was sitting Indian style in my man cave. And I'm just like, all right. And I told my wife like 10 minutes before, I'm like, I'm going to write a book. And she's like, I don't care. Don't want to hear it. She's like, I want to see you do it. She's like, I want to see you do it. Don't talk about it. Don't be one of those people.
Right.
So then I go sit in my man cave, and then I just start pulling out games: Mutant League Football, King's Bounty, E.T., Toe Jam and Earl, NHLPA 93, Boy and His Blob, stuff like that. Stuff that I grew up playing a lot. And I was just like, I know who developed these games. If I could get in touch with these guys, and if I can get half of them to get in contact with me, then I think I'll have enough to pitch a book. So I'll never forget the day. So it was like October 31st, 2016. So within a week, I got all 6 developers to answer me. So I'm like, okay, this could happen. So by Thanksgiving, like 3.5 weeks later, I have all 6 chapters written. I start pitching the book out to publishers. Thanksgiving is on a Thursday. 3 days later, the first business day after Thanksgiving, McFarlane emails me and they're like, yeah, we're interested. So we start emailing each other back and forth and they're like, we love the chapters, we love the structure that you're going for and stuff. But in order for this to work as a book, you need like at least 23 to 25 games. And I was just like, oh my God. Because it's hard. I mean, pitching people is hard. Finding people is hard.
What is that process? Is it mostly just emails or making
It's
calls?
emails, it's phone calls, it's, I mean, smoke signals, like whatever it is that...
Yeah, whatever you track down, right?
Yeah, I mean, I ended up calling the guy that programmed Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. I found out where he worked and I called his job, you know, like whatever I have to do to get in contact with these people.
And do you find that most people say yes once you contact them, or is it about a 50-50?
No, it's much higher than 50-50.
Yeah.
So the thing is, it's like if they answer you, you're in pretty good shape. Now, like I'm on book 7 and figure every book has at least 30 games in it, at least. So that's like over 200 games. Sometimes there's 2 or 3 developers in each chapter. So we're talking like easily 300 developers I've interviewed in the last like 4 years with these book series. The only time they say no is when they're working on a book themselves or when they feel like, because some of these games, they're under like non-disclosure agreements, like forever. So some of them like, I don't want to even open up that can of worms. But I mean, that's only happened maybe 3 or 4 times. So.
And what is your process of interviewing? You go in person before COVID, of course, but do you do the Zoom meeting?
It depends. Yeah, it depends.
However
it's like
can.
Before COVID, I did as many as I possibly could over the phone and in person. COVID has been a huge blessing because a lot of people are like, you know what? Send me the questions. I'm going to write my answers. I want to take my time. I'll send them back to you. You read them. And then if you have any questions for me, so then we'll do a Zoom. So I'll have given them like a month to answer the questions to the best of their ability. And they write like amazing stuff that I have to clean up and, you know, tighten and stuff like that. But then I'll call them and be like, well, you said this. Is that what you meant? Or blah, blah, blah. And we fine tune and I get background and stuff like that. So that's kind of like the process now. But I mean, before COVID, I remember I was sitting in a hotel lobby with Michael Brook, who's the assistant producer on the original Madden, Earl Weaver baseball, on the original NHL hockey, NHLPA 93, NHL 94, 95. Like he's a legend.
This is like EA Trip Hopkins back in the day, the 80s, right?
He was Trip Hawkins' personal assistant.
Oh, snap. Right on. So he was at the very forefront of all the video game revolution that came with sports. Yeah.
Absolutely. If you read the minds behind the sports games, like the Madden chapter, I'm not going to give it away, but it's like the stuff that he told me for that Madden chapter, I'll never forget it because like we're sitting across from each other and he tells me this and I'm just like, are you allowed to tell me this? And he's like, Trip Hawkins said it in an interview like a couple of years ago for like a magazine. He goes, but it's not online. And he goes, I don't think anyone like really caught on to like what he was trying to say. And I was just like, this is insane. He's like, yeah. So I remember as soon as I left, I went on my phone and I'm just Google searching like all of like the little buzzwords he gave me and like pieces of the story and nothing was online. So I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. So like every once in a while, well, not every once in a while, pretty much every chapter I ask them, like, tell me something that nobody else knows about this game. You know, I was on the Angry Burrito podcast a couple weeks ago. They're so good. Dan Nichols is hilarious. He loves like really crappy full motion video games. Like Night Trap and stuff like that.
Sega CD, Tom Zito, all that crap.
Yep, he loved. So Night Trap is like one of like my favorite chapters that I've ever written across any of my books. And Dan was just like, he goes, I thought I knew everything about Night Trap. And he goes, I read your chapter and I was just like, holy crap. He goes, I found out so much more about Night Trap. And I was just like, thank you. Because that's the point, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and it's the point eventually to have these, because eventually these are supposed to be books for scholarship use, right? These are going to be classroom books, hopefully, because I think in some colleges they have begun classes based upon video game history.
Yes,
these are textbooks that could be actually used and looked at. Like we said before, you know, so much of this stuff gets rehashed over and over again, whether it's an article or YouTube or whatnot, and people are just using the Wikipedia page. They're not going outside of it. So when I was reading the book earlier, I like the way that you write it too. Like you use you go personal with a lot of the people and you just do what they say verbatim. Then you go into the lore
Yes.
of the game or how the
Mhm.
game actually plays and stuff like that. And you use the pictures to kind of show what you're describing. But I was wondering, I was like, would it work if you haven't played the game? And that was what was wonderful about the writing, is it does work and it explains it perfectly. You have like this where you break it down and then it goes personal, and then break it down and then you go into it and break it down again. I thought that was really wonderful. And I
you.
haven't got to read the whole book, but from what I saw, I was like, okay, this could be used as a textbook. So was that your thought?
Initially, kind of like the book series that inspired the minds behind the games is Brett Weiss's 100 Greatest Games 1977 to 1987. I read that book, and it was just this really sexy coffee table book where it was like each game gets like a page or two, and it's just like kind of like a summation of the game. Tons of great artwork. So it was just like reading through that book, I got turned on to like maybe like 30 games that I had never heard of before. So I ended up interviewing Brett for my site, for reviewfix.com. And I initially wanted to write something kind of like that, but I wanted it to be more interview based because I'm a journalist. I have a master's degree in journalism. I teach journalism. And I just feel like it's more important for me to tell somebody else's story than for me to just write a book full of opinion. After doing all of these interviews, I just realized that like the power of all of this work was the quotes, like these guys telling the story and me having these quotes in, like you said, verbatim in their words. You know, that's the strongest part of the thing. So this is the thing with being a college professor. I've been a college professor for 15 years, but I've also been a writer for longer than that. And most college professors write to get promoted. They don't write for anyone to read their stuff. They write about like the wackiest nonsense. And all they have to do is just show that they wrote it, that it got published somewhere. And if you try hard enough, you can get anything published anywhere. And my whole thing was, I want to write a book that hardcore video gamers will appreciate, but that like an academic could look at it and see the scholarly value. So I wanted to write something that did a little bit of both. So right now, the 3 books that are out right now are in over 100 university libraries worldwide. So we're talking Stanford, UCLA, Michigan, Harvard, Pennsylvania. I mean, hardcore creme de la creme United States colleges, because the first book came out in August of 2018. So it hasn't even been 3 years yet, which is like nothing for a book. I mean, some books are out 5-6 years before anyone even knows that they exist. So it's like all of a sudden, the past like 6 months, I've been getting picked up by more college libraries, which is important. And then I saw like UCLA and Stanford were teaching video game history courses, and my book is one of the required texts. So I was like,
that's
yes.
awesome.
That's badass,
Yes.
dude.
So awesome. And then I go on Wikipedia quite often, and I'm just like, there's quotes in there on games, and I'm just like, whoa, wait a second. And then I'll click the little star on the bottom, and it's like the minds behind the games, and I'm just like, okay. So it's like,
Very nice.
yeah, you know, Ethan, that's like been my goal from the beginning, because one of the questions I always ask is like, what does Wikipedia have on you that's wrong? Like, let's
Right.
clear it up. Let's kill the urban legend, because like a lot of these urban legends just piss me off to like no one. Like, E.T. is not the worst game of all time.
No, it's not, Ethan. It's not. You heard
It's
what
not
Patrick said.
good, but
No,
it's
it
No,
is.
it's not good. It's
Okay.
not good. It's
Listen,
not. But
read
I
the
will-
manual. Read the manual. If you
In
read
Atari
the
Pac-Man
manual,
is 10 times worse, dude.
yes, in 5 weeks, I challenge like any Atari 2600 developer at that time to make a game in 5 weeks.
yeah.
None of them would be good. None
Yeah.
of them. You know,
I think Howard Scott Warshaw was happy with what he came up with after. I mean, he kind of goes back and forth. I think he likes the notoriety of it being the worst game.
he's awesome too.
Yeah. Oh, he seems like he is the coolest guy, and that's I saw that he's on the front of one the first book, I believe it is. And
Yeah,
so
I
was
love him.
Oh,
Yeah, it's not the worst game of all time. Night Trap is certainly not the most controversial game of all time. I mean, the politicians just latched onto that
they
one
went
for
to
some
town
reason.
on that game.
Yeah, they went to town. Like for that chapter, I listened to like 8 hours of like Senate congressional hearings.
Ooh.
And
who was it? Jack Trammell? Was that who was?
it was like Lieberman. It was like Howard Lieberman.
That's who it was. Yeah.
And he was just like, if you're a caring parent, you don't buy Night Trap for your children. And I'm just like, what?
But you know what? I'm not against what it eventually came from, which
Mm-hmm.
was the rating system. You know, the
Yeah.
USRB, which I mean, it has its faults too, but at the same time, that's pretty straightforward. And I think it helped a lot of people, and I think that it's useful. But at the same time, like they were pretty harsh. The Night Trap isn't that bad. I can understand Mortal Kombat, but Night Trap.
It's like you got Mortal Kombat, you got Doom, you've got Primal Rage, you got Lethal Enforcers. All of those games make it out, and they all become million sellers, and they all have like some type of notoriety in one way or another. But Night Trap just,
They got
I mean,
screwed.
yeah, the guy got screwed, you know.
And it sounds like you like
the
that
way-
game.
7 years for the game to come out too, because it was supposed to come out on the Project Nemo in 1985. Imagine if Night Trap comes out the same year as Super Mario Brothers. I mean, it would
I
have
did
been
not
wild.
know that. I did not know that was that long in production.
Yeah, and then
That
when
actually
Sega
explains
CD
it.
came out, they were like, "Oh, yo, we could turn all these VHS games. These would work much better on like a CD-based console."
Right. There was a weird one that I remember having. It was a weird shooting thing that set up. It was called Pop's Ghostly, which I'm sure you've heard of before, which was a VHS tape, and the laser would keep track of your score. And I
Mhm.
mean, it was all leading towards something eventually, but it was an actual VHS tape, Ethan, if you remember those. He's so
I
dumb.
remember VHS tapes, but I
But-
didn't know that they'd
Oh,
actually
dude,
put
this
games
is why
on there.
thrift shopping is the best, especially like 15 years ago. You could find the
Mhm.
coolest shit that people threw away and they had no idea. My biggest find ever was a CDI. When I found
wow.
that randomly thrift shopping, got it for $10, I resold it for 300 and moved to Texas.
I just saw one a couple of days ago for 600.
You almost bought it?
I
Bought it?
almost bought it. Mhm.
Yeah, it's not
the
worth
guy at the
it.
game store, yeah, it's not. The guy at the game store was like, "You want it, don't you?" And I'm just like, "Yeah." I'm like, "But I'm not going to do that."
It's just
Especially
gotta finish
now
that
with
collection.
kids.
But I was going to get into that. Do you have time to even play video games anymore with all the work that you're putting in? You're the ultimate networker. I see you out there working. So do you have time?
I would say no. But so this was the thing. It's like right before my son was born, I was gaming probably like an hour and a half a day. I had like when my daughter fell asleep and my wife was just chilling, I'd like massage her feet for like a half hour,
Oh.
and then I'd be like, I got to play Animal Crossing for a little while, or I got to play Outer Worlds a little while, or I want to play Fallout 4 or something like that, and or I have my RG 350 that I have like every game pre PS1 on there. Like I have to do research and stuff like that. But I mean, now it's hard because, having an 8-month-old, I mean, he demands your nonstop attention. Like my son grabs everything that's like in front of his face. Like if there's like a butcher knife, he'll like grab it and be like,
What is this?
like,
Yeah. Dad,
so
look.
it's like, oh man. So, and then it's like, teaching at home is rough. But I mean, I do find, I would probably say I game about 2-3 hours a week. I just make it count. I don't screw around and like I remember like when I would get like the new NHL, I would spend like 8 to 10 hours like editing the ratings of every single team, every player and stuff, and like making the game play the way that I felt that it was supposed to play. And now it's just like, yeah, just put it in, let's play it. So most of the gaming now that I do, I would consider like research. Like this week I scored 2 massive games for the 7th book that I'm working on, and I haven't played those games in probably a decade. So I told my wife, I was like, yeah, I have to go in the man cave for like 45 minutes. And she's like, okay. And I went in and I fired up the console and I started playing those games. And I was just like, damn, man, holy crap. So that's basically the way that I game now. I have a couple of $100 in GameStop gift cards from Christmas.
Nice.
But it's just like,
When do you have time? Well, that's
Yeah.
the thing is you're busy. Not
Yeah,
only are you doing
yeah.
the games, you're
Mhm.
working on a book for the for wrestling, correct? At this point, is
Oh
that
no,
still-
no, like yeah, that is going to be done eventually at some point. I did not expect. Well, I did expect. Let me not lie. I wanted to do this like this book as a series, but I didn't think, because what happened was I was originally going to do a sequel, and then my publisher signed me to a 3-book deal, and they're like, instead of doing the sequel, we want you to do 3 books. So I was writing the adventure, the sports, and the shooter book all at the same time, and as developers would get back to me, I would just fill in each book,
Right.
But the initial plan was to do the sequel and to do the wrestling book at the same time. And then it's just like, then this just like took on a world of its own. And then I got into voice acting for video games, and then I got into writing for video games. So it's like the wrestling book has kind of been put on the back burner. I still do a lot of wrestling stuff. Like I have 4 text edit files open right now. Like when this is over, I had to finish NXT and AEW stuff for my site. So it's like I still watch tons of wrestling. I still love it. I still interview tons of wrestlers. I still know tons of wrestlers. But sometimes they tell you as a journalist, it's not what you want to write about, it's what you'll get paid to write about, or it's what
Right.
you need to write, And I feel like my audience wants more stuff from me. So I'm not going to deny them, So yeah.
Hey everyone, it's just Stuck jumping in here to say thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. If you're enjoying it, head over to your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, or iTunes, and give We Are Podcast Network a like. And don't forget to join our social media. You can find us at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at /We Are Podcast. And don't forget to join our Discord. All links can be found in the description. With that said, back to the podcast.
But at the same time, you said you got into the voice acting, and by doing the book and talking to the developers, like I said, the ultimate networker, you were able to make those connections, correct?
That was such a wild, like, I finished the first book. And what happens is after I finish the first book, it's like a month where I'm not like doing anything like crazy. I'm writing for my site. So I write like 2 or 3 articles a day for my site. And what starts to happen is people that didn't get back to me for the first book are getting back to me. And I'm just like, the team from Loaded on PS1, which was like such a sexy top-down shooter, they were the first. And then, so now I have like 8 or 9 people that got back to me that want to talk to me. So I'm like, I'm going to have to do a sequel. So I started doing that. But then I love indie games. I love playing like really wild, off-the-wall games made by like one person in his basement and stuff. So I came across this game called The Padre. And I remember just seeing like an animated GIF. And it's just like this voxelized priest. It looked like something out of like Minecraft. And he was walking down this like dark like path. And then this tree just like kind of came alive and like bitch slapped him right in the face. And I was like, this is lit very well. The animations are good. I'm like, I want to interview these guys. So I messaged them on Twitter and I'm like, do you guys want to do an interview? And they're like, our English isn't that good. So I was like, all right, I'll send you some questions via email. And I'm like, I'll edit you. And I'm like, before we publish it, I'll let you read over your answers to make sure that, you know, I'm saying everything that you want me to say in context. Like their English was good. It was solid. So I published the interview. Turns out I was the first person to ever like show any interest in the game. First person to ever like interview them. So they're like, you want to play a beta? I'm like, sure. So it's like a point and click survival horror, kind of like Alone in the Dark, but it looks like Minecraft. It's got really good music. And first line in the game, there's like a typo. So I told him, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Ethan, the face you're making right now, same exact face I made. And I'm like, guys, you've got so many good things going for you for this game, but it's like if the text isn't edited properly, you're done.
Yeah, right. You can't let a typo kill the momentum.
Yeah. And it was like the first sentence in the game. So I was like, listen, I've taught English, you know, for over a decade. If you want me to edit your game, edit all the dialogue, I'll do it. So we came up with a price. So it was crazy. I went to my wife. I'm like, I'm being paid to work on a video game. This is crazy.
Yeah.
So they paid me. And then I was doing like some light quality assurance stuff for them, like playing through the game. And every time I would find a bug, I would send them a log and stuff like that. And that was fun. It kind of ended. And then a couple of weeks later, they sent me a whole bunch of more dialogue. And they're like, no, you're on the team now. They're like, we're going to pay you every time you do this. Da, 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 da. So then they're getting ready to go to Kickstarter. And they're like, can you edit the whole Kickstarter campaign? And I'm just like, that's mad pressure.
Yeah.
You know? But I'm like, I'll do it. Right before we're about to go live on Kickstarter, the voice actor leaves. And they're like, we're fucked. Those were their words, not mine.
Yeah.
But you were thinking they're fucked.
well, no. Well, see, what I said was, I was like, well, it's not that bad a thing. And they're like, why? I'm like, because he wasn't that good anyway. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I was like, it's supposed to be a scary game. And I'm like, he sounds like Russell Brand. I'm like, just walking around this dark mansion, you know. It's like, wow, you know. And it didn't make any sense.
Spooky over there. Look at that. That's a real creeper right there. Oh.
Ethan, I'm telling you. So it's like every time I would watch the trailer, I would cringe. I would be like, what is it? No, this doesn't fit. And now I've edited all of the dialogue in this game, and I wrote a lot of the one-liners for the character and stuff like that. They gave me a ton of creative freedom. So I was like, I could voice this character better.
Because you're already in the mind of the character. You've been writing him for this long.
You are the character at this point, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah.
So I've always been good at that movie trailer voice, like,
in a world, one man, one tortilla, Ducky Wenzel.
Yes, finally somebody said it in an epic way.
You know, so, but I was like, I can't use that voice because that would be ridiculous. So I'm like, they want somebody with an English accent. So I'm like, so what if I combine the two?
So a boy came across this dark English voice. My name is Alexander, and I am the Padre, and I'm walking through the valley of the shadow of death, and blah, blah, blah.
And they were like, we love this. And the thing was, to find that voice, now I can go back and forth, but to find that voice, I mean, my throat was like on fire. Like I was coughing blood. It was awful.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, but once I found it, I was just like, we got something. So I sent it to them and they're like, can you do all the dialogue for the game, like right now? And I'm just like, yeah, I could do it right now.
Because of the tunnel vision. Once you get going though, you've made up your mind. You continue down that path. So
I did it and it took me like 45 minutes and we ended up re-recording again. But they put it in the game. So we ended up not getting funded on Kickstarter. But I had done so many interviews, and because the thing is, Benz is awesome, the creator of the Padre. He's amazing, but his English isn't great. So it's just like he doesn't like to do interviews. So I was just like, I'll do interviews. So I was going on people's Twitch streams, and they were playing the game, and I was popping in and
Bloody talking like this, blah, blah, blah. And
we had fun, and we ended up getting picked up by Feardemic, and the reviews were like okay. Like I would say like the game is like a 6 out of 10. Like that's kind of like the Metacritic thing, like a 60, which is all right. It's their first game, but like all the critics love the voice acting. They were like, yeah, the main character in the game is an asshole in like the best way possible.
And you wrote those lines too. You were the one that put that.
I wrote a nice chunk of them, but I edited all of them too. So it's just like whatever I didn't write, I edited. That was so much fun. So now the sequel is coming out in like a month. But what ended up happening was the game comes out in like January of 2018, and then my book comes out in April of 2018. So now it's like now I'm the star of a video game, and I have a book series coming out. So I just started doing podcasts like crazy.
Right.
So then I remember I got a message on Facebook. Ducky, I liked you the second that you said to Ethan, read the ET instruction manual. Because that's me.
Man. Yes.
I look at the credits and stuff like that. So I get a message from Pete Paquette. And he's like, is this Patrick Hickey, the author of the minds behind the games? And I'm like, is this Pete Paquette, the guy that worked on Gladius and Bioshock Infinite? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, dude, I am so honored to speak to you right now. He's like, I am honored to speak to you. He's like, that's why I'm messaging you. He's like, I would love for you to come on my podcast. So I went on his podcast. We had a great time. And then at the end of the podcast, he's like, if you want to do more in video games, let me know. And I'm like, I'm letting you know. So we get off the air, and he's like, I'm going to call you in like 2 weeks. So I tell my wife, I'm like super excited. My wife is like, let's wait the 2 weeks and see what happens. I'm like, you're right. My wife is awesome. She's just like, she could win the lottery, and I would be like throwing the money up in the air, getting naked, rolling around in it.
Woo!
And my wife would be like, nope, this is going to go in the bank right now. Put your clothes back on.
Well, that's what you need.
Relax.
Whenever you're a go-getter like that, you need somebody who's a realist who can pull you back and go, okay, I got this. We'll take care of
Solid
this.
rock.
That's a good team. That's what a team makes.
She's awesome.
We did a podcast with an indie developer, and they had the same dynamic. The guy was like up in the air, ready to go at all times, and his producer was like, I rein him in when I need to. I rein him in when I need to. So it sounds like that's a perfect team. So anyhow, you're waiting for the call.
So now he calls me, and he gives me like this idea for a game, and it's very bare bones. And he's just like my brother is going to engineer the game, program the game, and do the music. And he goes, and I'm going to animate the game. He goes, but what I want you to do is, he's like, I want you to take this story. It was very bare bones. None of the characters were named. It was just like, this guy does this, and then he could kind of have conflict with this guy and that guy. And he's like, I want you to go write it. And I was like, I write nonfiction, bro. Like, I'm a journalist. I speak to like real people. He goes, you could totally do this. He's like, you could totally do this. And he goes, you've played more games than most people will ever play in their entire life. He goes, you've spoken to more developers, he goes, than most people ever will in their entire life. He goes, you can do this. So within like a week, I ended up banging out the first draft of the game, which is Kroom, Kroom. And the three of us have been working on and off on it for like 2 years. And it's like COVID kind of slowed us down big time. That was like the second game that I worked on. And then I did narration on the Caillou Offensive, Relentless Rex. And then now I'm working with Tony Barnes, who, listen, they say never meet your idols because it'll like change your opinion of them. So like, Tony Barnes worked on Madden, NHL 94, Crew Bowl, Desert Strike, Jungle Strike, Urban Strike, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Medal of Honor, Strider. I love his work. I ended up interviewing him for a couple of the books. He wrote the foreword to the Sega Genesis book. He ended up leaving Amazon Games, and he started his own company. He needed somebody to do some voiceover for a game that he was working on called Run Die Run Again. So I'm like the narrator in that game. So it's just like, so now I'm working with him on that game and a couple of other things that I can't announce yet. I also did some writing for a game that I wrote, I would say a little bit over a dozen side quest missions for an upcoming adventure game that I can't say anything about, that's coming out soon. And it's a big it's a AAA company that's publishing it. So they contacted me, they asked me if I wanted to write it. So that was crazy. So it's just the last like 3 years, 3.5 years have just been like
Absolutely nuts.
totally insane. Yeah.
And on top of that, you have a website, like you said, reviewfix.com, where you are the head editor and you're writing articles still at the same time.
Yeah, I own the site. I created the site. I own the site. I write like 90% of the content for it. I have like probably like 6 or 7 other people that contribute a couple articles a week, but it's just like, I mean, at one time I had like 30 people writing for
Wow.
it. But I mean, while writing these books, I never stopped writing ReviewFix. So ReviewFix gets at least 3 new articles every day. So it's like professional wrestling stuff, theater, music. The site's been around for 11 years.
Mhm.
And there's been at least 1 exclusive interview on the site every day for the entire 11 years.
Wow.
So like we,
Damn.
you know, like I post stuff to like YouTube twice a week for the site, just so I have like video content on the site, just to spice things up a little bit. So this way people aren't just reading all the time. So this way they watch little crappy videos of me playing games and stuff like that. But I mean, I'm far from a YouTuber or a Twitch superstar. I never ever want to be considered like an influencer.
Mm.
You know, like I just want to be the guy that writes about cool shit, you know?
And has a positive attitude about it too. That's the other thing, is you're very
Mhm.
prolific. Like I said, you do so many things, but you have also, you want to build other people up. I mean, you reached out to us to do
Mhm.
this podcast. You said, hey,
Oh,
you
yeah.
guys want to guest? And I was like, heck yeah. Then I got nervous because I started reading the accolades and I was like, not sure how this is going to go. Yes, exactly. And
I
then,
was just on a show a couple of days ago and they said the same shit. And then like a couple of weeks before that, I was on another show and they're like, we were surprised you even wanted to hang out with us. And my thing is, it's like, your followers don't know me, you know? So it's like every day, like you just found out about me a couple of weeks ago. That book has been out for 2.5 years. You just picked it up. So it's brand new to you. So my whole thing is, it's just like, I don't have the luxury of being somebody that has like 1 million followers where I'm just like, oh, they'll find me. I have to go out and I have to go find people. So
but the networking has worked out for you, obviously,
Mhm.
because of doing it, and you're used to it too. It becomes almost, it seems like it's second nature to you,
yeah.
from chasing down the interviews, chasing down the developers, just chasing down everything. I do want to ask you, what do you recommend to people who want to, number one, I read earlier, if you're going to write, just fucking write, basically is what you said. Because if you can say you're a writer, but until you publish something, you're not. Just get it done. And you ended up taking the job of somebody who denied you. Is that correct? Somebody who said that you would never get it done. I read somewhere that there was a college professor who said, is that the same one you told us earlier, or this was a different person?
No, I had, I'll never forget it. So I teach advanced journalism at the college that I work at. And I ended up getting a B+ in that class when I took it. And the teacher just had a hard on for me. And I think there
In a
was like
sexual way, or she was
she just didn't like
you.
me.
Yeah.
She just didn't like me. It's like I could say, like I remember one time she was like, you used an article in my class in the student newspaper. And I was like, well, it's my article.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
why wouldn't you want to say that your students are using their work in your class, that they think that much of it, that they would want to get it published? I said this as a 20-year-old. I'm like, everything that I write, I want to get published. None of this is just like a stupid assignment for me. I take this shit seriously, you know? And she never thought that I had it. And I worked harder than everybody else in that class. And like, I remember I was basically like a sophomore in college because I went to a 2-year college first. So when I was a senior at that college, I was technically a sophomore. I interviewed David Wright, who was the third baseman from the Mets, All-Star. I interviewed Dana Snyder, who plays Master Shake on Aqua Teen Hunger Force. I had interviewed Diamond Dallas Page, a professional wrestler. Like I did tons of really cool stuff. And it just got to the point where I told her, I was like, in the last 8 months, I've interviewed boom, 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 boom. What have you done? And she was just like, oh, well, I wrote, you know, I used to do magazine layout. And I'm like, well, what magazine? Let's Google you. Let's Google you right now. And she was just like, she did not like that at all. And fast forward 3 years from that exact day, and I was teaching the same class that I had just gotten a B+ in.
Right.
So my whole thing is, it's just like, sure, there are people that I meet that I'm like, I don't know. But I'm always going to try and empower people. I'm always going to tell people what I think they could do to get to the next level, and not tell them that I think that they can't make it, because you would be surprised, you know. And that's the thing too. Still to this day, I teach on Zoom, and the look on my students' faces when they see me for the first time, like I'm 37, they still think that I'm a student. They don't think that I'm a college professor.
Bro, you look young. You do. You look like you're in your 20s. Like,
thank you. College professors don't look like this. It's like, what is a college professor supposed to look like? So my whole thing is, it's just like I said, because she said one time in class, she was just like, oh, Patrick works as hard as he does because he has to, because he's not as talented as everybody else, and he's a little bit older, and blah, blah, blah. Because of my accident, I didn't start college at 18. I was 20, you know. But when she said that, it was like I was like Yosemite Sam. Like the steam was like coming out of my ears, and I was just like, I'm gonna prove you wrong.
And you got
You
a
know?
job, so she can.
And
go
I ended
fuck
up.
herself.
I mean, she retired,
Well,
but
whatever.
I still got her job, and I still
Either
have
way,
it.
it's still
Got a job.
success,
That's what
man.
I'm saying, man.
Mhm.
The positivity, though, like I said, what drives you? You said earlier that people saying no, you can't do it, or challenging you, but it sounds like there's something inside you that's just your own personal. Like you started momentum and you're just rolling downhill, and now you're living within momentum.
Well, it's
What
like before when you said, I think it was Ethan that was like Patrick Hickey, you know? And I love my dad, but I'm not him. And it's like I think about it all the time that like at this age, my dad had twin 15-year-old boys. And it's like, you're done.
Right.
Your life is over. Like, what are you going to accomplish? You're not going to go back to school. You've got to support a family. You know, you're a blue collar, hardworking guy. But it's like, what are you dreaming? Like, what's the big picture? Like, he never got a chance to do that. So it's like with me, like I'm 37, but I still feel like I'm like in my early to mid 20s. I still have tons of things that I want to do. And it's like, since I said before, like I have an awesome wife and she understands. And it's just like, we have this awesome balance. She runs her own business. Like I'm doing my stuff. And it's just like, we lean on each other. And my kids, well, my daughter, she's 3, she definitely understands it. And my son is going to understand it. But it's just like, you have to have a job that you could support your family. But then after that, I mean, a full-time job shouldn't take over your life fully. What you guys are doing with the podcast, that's perfect. You need a side hustle. You need to have something that you get excited about. And then the key is to like one day transition from that side hustle and make that something that you can really like do for the rest of your life, you know? So it's just like for me, I mean, that's the goal. Like one day if I could just write books, I mean, I would love to do that. And I might be 60 when that happens, you know, but who cares? So it's just like looking at my dad and seeing like, you know, where he was at my age. And then too, it's just like a white kid from Bensonhurst. I mean, 6'4", you know, 250 pounds. People would expect me to be like a cop or a garbage man or something like that, you know? Right. And I have like the softest hands in like the entire world. I don't do manual labor, you know. It's just like my wife is like, throw out the garbage, and I'm like, oh man, for real,
don't make me.
You know. So it's like I earn my living sharing, you know, my thoughts and telling other people's stories. So it's just like I never lose track of like what I could be, what everybody wanted me to be, what everyone thought that I would be, and what I actually am and what I want to be. And I always remind myself of that.
Man, I can't get over this. You just radiate so much passion and dedication to your dreams, your goals. That's inspiring, man. Like I'm getting hyped
for the
up.
TED Talk.
I mean it's real talk. You know, it's real talk. You know?
We need the TED Talk, dude. That's whenever things it'll pump up like crazy. I mean,
well, see, that's the thing too. I mean, that's why I do as many podcasts. Like, I'm trying to reach as many people as possible. I really believe in these books, and like I said, every day I see that I get in another college library, and another person quotes me, or another person does a YouTube video and cites one of my books, or like I go to the post office a couple of times a week and I ship out books that people buy off of me and stuff. And it's just like I want to build this into something. It's just like, why is it that you can remember the name of a poet, or you could remember the name of a director of a movie, or you could remember the bassist in a band, but you can't remember the programmer of a game that you spent 500 hours playing? Why doesn't that person get to tell their story? Why don't we care about the fact that like Max Payne was inspired by Norse mythology, or the producer of Aladdin is 6'8" and slept in his car during the entire development cycle? You know, like why don't we care about stuff like that? Why don't we care about the fact that like Retro Studios couldn't finish a goddamn game and they somehow got a contract with Nintendo and ended up doing all the Metroid games? Like, why don't we care about all of those stories? So it's just like, I feel like most gamers care about them. They just don't know that they exist. So it's like kind of my job to connect them with those stories. I was having a conversation with somebody today on Instagram, a good friend of mine. We were BSing, and I made a comment about WarioWare. It's so much fun, but they stole the minigame idea from Sony, and Sony stole it from somebody else. So he was like, really? And I'm like, dude, how do you think the Wii exists? I'm like, Miyamoto saw the iToy and he was like, we should be doing something like this. So Miyamoto put his own stamp on the iToy, and a year later you have the Nintendo Wii. So he's like, really? He's like, you just blew my mind. I'm like, dude, and I just sent him the link for the book. I'm like, dude, just educate yourself, you know? So it's just like, that's what I want. I want to have super nerdy conversations with people about games, but that are fun. So that's the thing. I'm a college professor, but I don't feel like I write like your typical stuffy college professor. I write in a very conversational, down-to-earth tone. So this way you guys could take in all that stuff. And the sad part is, it's like every time I finish a book, I feel like a complete piece of crap.
Why?
Because what happens is you guys know everything that I know.
So you don't get to keep anything for yourself.
So what do I got to do? I got to go out and write another book. Like
Right.
I've had conversations with people and I'm just like, wow, you understand these developers just as well as I do. I got to go write another book, you know? So that's
awesome.
So it's like, I feel like I'm in like Lamb Chop Play Along, like the song that never ends, you know? But I mean, it's been fun. So since you guys have been so awesome.
Are we going to get it?
The new book that I am working on is the minds behind the Sony PlayStation 2 games.
Fuck yes.
Yes.
Fuck yeah. Who are you interviewing?
I'll give you the list of the confirmed games, meaning I've written the chapters already.
Damn.
Okay, so War of the Monsters, Downhill Domination, NHL 2002, Guitar Hero 3, FIFA 05, and Sly Cooper. But I have 25 other games that are waiting. I'm waiting for the answers for and stuff. So the other ones I can't say yet because I haven't written them and anything could happen, but I'm pretty confident that like I'm going to have some crazy stuff.
Dude,
so
you are prolific. I cannot believe that you came to us for an interview. We appreciate it so much.
Yeah,
we really
man.
do.
So like I said, the sequel to the Padre is coming out in like a month. One Shell Straight to Hell. So it's not a point and click game anymore. It's kind of like Contra. It's just like this top-down shooter that's like really sexy. It's a lot of fun. So you should check that out. That's really cool. But the minds behind the shooter games is going to be out very soon, probably in like the next 6 weeks or so. And then the minds behind the Sega Genesis games and the minds behind the Sony PlayStation games will be out like around the end of 2021, early 2022. So by the end of this year, I should have 6 published books. So that's pretty cool. So this is the thing. The books are available on Target, Walmart, Barnes & Noble, Indigo, Books A Million, wherever fine books are sold digitally. And online you can get them. But if you go to my website, patrickhickeyjr.com, and you order the book from me, I will not only sign your book and personalize it, I do really cool stuff. So it's just like, say you're from Cleveland. Once you pay for the book, I'm going to get an email from you and I'll have like your address so I could ship out the book to you. But I'm going to do something that like most authors don't do. And I'm going to email you and I'm going to start a conversation with you. And I'm going to be like, oh, so Cleveland Indians, Browns, Cavaliers, like, what are you into? So like, if you buy the sports book, like I'm going to put like 30-year-old like baseball and football cards in your book. Like if you're like if you're like a Spider-Man fan, like you got the Spider-Man hat on there, I'll go to the antique store near my house and buy a pack of like Marvel cards and I'll put a pack of cards in there for you. You know, I had somebody that was a big Pokemon fan, so I got a Pokemon Pez and I put it in there for them. Because when I used to meet people at conventions, I used to like have lollipops and like candy and like I would want to have conversations with people and connect with them. So it's like I can't do that anymore. So because of COVID, that's what I do. So if you want to support me, listen, I'll take a sale from any place. But I think if you want like a one-of-a-kind item, if you want to truly connect with me, then go to patrickhickeyjr.com, order the book directly from me, sign something, I'll write something really witty in there, and we'll start the conversation. The last thing that I'll say is like, I am on Instagram a lot. Yeah. I love Instagram. It's like stream of consciousness for me. So it's like if I'm walking to like Dunkin' Donuts in the morning, getting my morning coffee, and I'm just like, remember that pinball game on the TurboGrafx 16? I'll just do like a Google search and be like, pull up a screenshot and be like, oh shit, I want to play this later, and throw it on Instagram because I want people to kind of like connect with me. I want people to kind of see how I'm thinking and stuff. Like right before the podcast, I played like 3/4 of NFL Game Day 98 because I interviewed the developer for the PlayStation 1 book. That's the first Sony football game to be fully polygonal, no sprites and stuff like that. So it's a really important football game, but I love it. It's one of my favorite football games of all time. So right before I went online with you guys, I posted the screenshot, like what I'm playing right now. So if you want to support me, of course, buy the book, but also just like following me on Instagram, sharing my posts and stuff. I mean, you don't have to spend any money to support anybody. So like what you guys are doing right now, giving me a avenue to talk. I mean, that's the best support in the world. So like, I'm completely grateful for that. So I really appreciate that.
It's Instagram. You're also on Facebook and Twitter, I believe, too. It's all Patrick Hickey Jr. Across the board.
Facebook is Patrick Hickey Jr. Twitter is ReviewFixPat because I mostly just like share the articles from the website and stuff like that on Twitter. I'm not that much of a fan of Twitter. I feel like you can't say a lot and it's so political and it's just like I am totally like anti-politics. Like of course I have my own opinions, but it's just like it's nobody's business. It's your personal politics. You know, this is the thing that I love about video games, Ducky, is like Ethan could go right now, I hate Night Trap. And we would go, what?
Yeah.
Why? And we would have like a 45-minute conversation. And then Ethan would be like, you know what? Guess what? It still sucks. But all right, it's got some cool parts. Okay,
It's cool,
but
I guess.
but it's like if Ducky goes, I'm red, and then Ethan goes, I'm blue, then you guys both go on Facebook and go, anybody that's red or anybody that's blue and is not the same color as me, don't talk to me, don't follow me. And it's just like, why are we like separating ourselves like this? And that's what I love about video games. Video games bring people together, and that's what I want, especially now. Like, I want to connect with as many people as possible. So,
real quick question: what do you think about Sonic Adventure 2?
I
It sucks.
like,
okay,
this is our red and blue thing here.
I'm just kidding.
I like the first one a lot more.
Boom.
Oh,
I do.
Patrick is right about everything. Everything always. He is 100% the number one guest we've ever had on this show. He knows what he's talking about. Period. Done. Patrick, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, no problem.
yeah,
Pleasure.
yeah, thank you.
With that said, this has been Duck. I've been here with
Reverend D, baby.
and Patrick. We got to tell you something. All right, Patrick. So many people don't know this. So many people are not this, but you, sir, are this. You are Billy Mitchell, bitch. You're Billy Mitchell, man. You're killing it all the time.
Nice.
Have you interviewed
Everybody
him?
else?
No, I would love to. So this is the thing that's really funny. This guy Todd Friedman, who just wrote a book with Walter Day on Walter Day's whole career and stuff. I'm also in Walter Day's Superstars of Gaming trading card series. They gave me a card last year, which was so cool.
Dude. That is awesome.
The guy Todd Friedman that like runs all of these events, and he works with Walter. He's a sweetheart. He's bought all of my books. He's such a nice guy. I probably made about 100 Minds Behind the Games t-shirts before COVID, and I was selling them on the site, and they went like crazy. And Todd takes pictures like all over the place with the shirt on, like Grand Canyon. Like, he's amazing. He's such a cool guy. And a couple of weeks ago, he sends me a picture, and he's hanging out with Billy Mitchell, and he's got his arm around Billy Mitchell with a Minds Behind the Games shirt on. And I was like, yes, like, so cool.
You are 100% Billy Mitchell. You're
I have
just
to totally
killing it.
like make a post and
Dude,
say they said I'm Billy Mitchell, bitch. Like,
Dude, you are though. That's what I'm saying. Like, you're killing it.
And there it is. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. If you enjoyed it, please head over to your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, or iTunes, and give We Are Podcast a like. And if you enjoyed this podcast, you're going to love the other podcasts here on the We Are Podcast Network. We have We Are, where we talk movies, entertainment, whatever the fuck we want to talk about. That's me, that's Jake, that's Javi. We're breaking down pop culture, and we're having a blast. Heroes, Gyros, a Dungeons and Distractions side quest. Me and the boys were playing some D&D, and we're having so much fun. I hate being sober. Personal stories from epic people, where I sit down with some of my favorite people on this planet. We talk about their trials, their tribulations, and we just talk about whatever we want to talk about. And finally, Camp Slash Horrorcast. That's our weekly video cast. Join us every Monday at 8 p.m. Central Time on Twitch as we break down our favorite horror movies from the past. Check out our social media. You can find us at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at /We Are Podcast. And don't forget to join our Discord. All links can be found in the description. With that said, thank you again for checking out the podcast today. We truly hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and please share with your friends. That's the only way we can grow this channel. With that said, we'll see you on the next one.